appreciate your being with us, and we hope that things are going well for you. So just as we're starting, I just have a couple of announcements. Believe it or not, we're in June and we're beginning to do work on our 2021 Prince George's Senior Resource Guide. And so we will be contacting each of you to get updated information, because it's really important that we have important, accurate information for everyone. And so we appreciate your cooperation when we do call you to get that information from you. Our board is also looking at expanding our social media presence. And so again, we'd like if you would like our Facebook page. In July, we will be holding our virtual membership meeting July 16th, and our guest speaker will be Dr. Matthew Mintz, who will be sharing information on medical cannabis use for seniors. And then on July 30th, we'll be hosting a webinar called Care for the Caregiver, focusing on care for the professional caregivers during these challenging times. So you will be getting links for these meetings, and then after our session today, we'll open it up for questions and answers and any other information that you may want to share. So at this time, I'd like to introduce to you my namesake, Jennifer Brown. And Jennifer Brown is the Community Relations Manager for Seabury Resources for Aging. Let's see, my video went out. Okay, so Jennifer is the Community Relations Manager for Seabury Resources for Aging. She brings 50 years of professional experience in all aspects of medical, healthcare, and public health industries. Prior to joining Seabury in April of 2019, Jennifer served for 8.5 years as the Director of Marketing, Admissions, and Commissions for Forest Hills of DC, Forest Side Memory Care, formerly the Methodist House of DC. From 2005 to 2011, Jennifer was the Director of Sales and Marketing for the Fountains at Washington House, which is a CCRC located in Alexandria, Virginia. Jennifer holds a Bachelor of Science and a Master's degree in Psychology. So I'd like for you guys to welcome Jennifer Brown with us. And so Jennifer, as we get started, I'd like for you to share with our audience how you actually became active in the LGBTQ rights movement for us. And welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much. And I'm really pleased to be with everyone this morning. And that was a very, very kind introduction. So just as to answer Jennifer's question, I'm not ashamed of it. I'm proud of it. I'll be 71 in September. And I became active in the broadest sense of gay rights starting in the 1980s into the 1990s. And I continue to be active in varying degrees in the gay rights movement up until today. And I do want to start out by saying I know some of you in the audience. I certainly don't know all of you. And I don't have an appreciation for everyone's knowledge, experience, how well you've been engaged with the gay community. So I want to start up by saying this is kind of cultural sensitivity 101. And if by any chance I'm starting out at too basic a level, I just want to apologize for that, because I don't know where we're all starting from. The other thing I just wanted to say about Seabury is a 96-year-old private not-for-profit organization. We are in Montgomery and Prince George's County. To be clear, we were planning on expanding our presence in Prince George's County starting in 2020, and part of my job as community relations manager was to improve our presence in Prince George's County. I started out in 2020. I spent the month of January in grand jury duty. That was quite an experience. And then in February, we were rolling out our plans to improve our presence in Prince George's County. And in March, we were all sent home and to work remotely since March 10th. Seabury is very proactive. So while I've hoped to be meeting you all in person and spending much more time with you in meeting and learning about your businesses, that's obviously been sidetracked for a while. But at the end of the program, I will put all of my contact information in the chat box. And certainly if you would like a copy of the PowerPoint, I'd be happy to share it with you or share whatever else I can with you. So I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint right now.
And Jennifer, just let me know when you want me to share the results of the poll.
Oh, okay.
You can do that now if you want, Steve. Well, yeah, go ahead.
There we go.
So the question was, what percentage of people who identify as LGBTQ avoid medical care out of a fear of discrimination? And you guys hit it right on the nose. It is 20%. 93% of you responded that way. So you've already got a pretty good feel for part of what we're going to discuss this morning. So let's start with real basics, LGBTQ. L is the reference to lesbians. Lesbians are women who enjoy the company, companionship, intimacy, and marriage with other women. Gay refers to the boys in the group, the men. Gay men are individual men who enjoy love, intimacy, companionship, and marriage with other men. Bisexuals, which is probably one of the least understood, are both men and women who enjoy intimacy with both men and women. And they may be companioned or married with a same-sex couple. They may be companioned or married with an opposite-sex couple, but they enjoy relationships with both men and women. Transgender refers to both trans men and trans women. Trans men are individuals who were identified at birth as female and have, throughout the course of their journey, identified, present themselves, and live as males or trans men. Trans females is the opposite, individuals who are born or identified at birth as male, and through their personal journey, identify, present themselves, and live as females, and they are trans women. The last word is queer. And queer is always had been kind of perceived as a derogatory term. It is not a derogatory term in the gay world. Language can be very painful. Language can be used to hurt people. And queer has been reclaimed by the gay community as an affirming term, as a positive term, as a way of self-identification, and it is not now considered derogatory. So I'm going to use the term queer, because if every time I try to say LGBTQ, I'm going to stumble on my tongue every time. One thing I forgot to mention at the start, I have a lecture, but I have a presentation. I want participation. Raise your hand, enter comments into the chat box, ask questions, offer stories, comments. Please try to make this a little more interactive so that I'm not just, you're not listening to the sound of my voice for the next half hour. Steve will help. Steve will identify people who raise their hands, and I'm encouraging you to do that. And also Steve will read out questions or comments from the chat box so that this is not just me speaking to the group. A little bit more on language and definition. Allies, I hope everybody on this call is an ally, and maybe if not at the end, you will be an ally. Those are individuals who do not identify as queer, but are supportive of the queer movement, of gay rights, gay civil rights, may have family members in their immediate or extended family or their friends who are allies or supporters.
Hey, Jennifer?
Yeah.
Jennifer, got a question, and Whoops. So we have a question. It says, so queer is an all-encompassing term?
Yes. Queer is a blanket term. It embraces all folks who consider themselves non-conforming to heterosexual norms. That's not a derogatory comment. That's just a statement of fact. So a queer woman or a queer man or a queer trans person can be a lesbian, can be gay, can be a trans man, can be a trans woman, can be a bisexual person. It is an embracing term of all of the LGBTQ community.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I'm not going to read out all of these definitions. Like I said, I'm happy to share these slides with you. Couple of things I want to touch on is gender expression and gender identity. So gender expression is how someone presents themselves in the world. It can be more feminine presentation, more masculine presentation. Sometimes it's more of a neutral presentation. And it's how one feels about themselves and presents themselves publicly through hairstyle, clothes, makeup, jewelry, affect. And it's how someone identifies the core of their soul and expresses themselves publicly. Gender identity is how one is as they identify as either male or female or trans. And gender expression and gender identity usually go hand in hand. But I do want to clarify that if one has a gender expression of female, they may in fact enjoy intimacy with other females, or they may enjoy intimacy with males, or they may enjoy intimacy with other trans individuals. So it's one's sexual orientation is different from one's gender expression or one's gender identity. I know that's a lot to process, but it does mean that you can't simply stick a label on someone and assume that their sexual orientation, their gender expression, their gender identity are all monolithic.
Mm-hmm.
Being outed, I want to touch on this a little bit. If you have friends, coworkers, family members, and they confide in you that they are a queer person, they are coming out to you, which is the term next on this slide. When they confide in you about themselves, which is great, and it shows a lot of trust and a great deal of I think, trust and affection for you, you do not simply have the right to communicate that without clearing that with your friend or your family member or your coworker. Being outed is a negative term. That means that someone is communicating publicly information which is private. Mm-hmm. And being outed could be very harmful to certain individuals. So when they come out to you and communicate to you and trust you, the other half of that is you must respect that and clarify with them how wide communication, how broad a circle is this information to be shared. Mm-hmm. Sorry. I've touched on sexual orientation. I've touched on transgender. We'll move on a little bit further. History, this is an incredible week. It's amazing that we're doing this program today and what the Supreme Court ruling was on Monday. So I want to touch back a little bit on the history that's not on this slide. So this month, the end of this month is the 51st anniversary of the Stonewall riots. Stonewall riots occurred in Lower Manhattan at the Stonewall Inn, a bar, gay bar, starting in June 28th, 1966. I was 19 at the time. And it is marked as the start of the modern gay rights movement. When the police came in, busted the bar, and the typical response of the patrons was to just quietly go along with the police and try to minimize the impact of the event as much as possible. The Stonewall was a dive bar, as divey bar as it can be. It was lesbian women, it was gay men, it was young kids, street kids, teenagers, and drag queens. Drag queens, genetic males who just enjoy and wish to present themselves in female attire. And drag queens are typically referred to as individuals who like to perform. Drag is pretty common now. RuPaul has made drag mainstream, but in 1969, it was hardly mainstream. That night, the patrons decided not to cooperate with the police, not to go quietly in the night, but to protest the invasion of the bar by the New York City police. And the 51st anniversary of that event is this month in June. If we look at this timeline, you go from 1969 to 1996, when the Supreme Court first struck down Colorado Amendment 2. Amendment 2 was a state amendment voted on by the citizens of Colorado that actively denied gays and lesbians protection against discrimination. So it actively denied them their civil rights. You go up to 2003 in Lawrence versus Texas, where the US Supreme Court ruled that the sodomy laws in the state of Texas were unconstitutional. So take a thought about that for a second. Up until 2003, individuals in the state of Texas could be charged with a crime for having intimate sex in the privacy of their home under Texas state law. So when we think about our clients, we think about our family members, we think about our customers. Our customers are older adults, seniors. Our customers are the sons and daughters of older adults. Our customers and clients and families may be the grandchildren of older adults. So it's a big spectrum of individuals that we're serving in our industry. But let's talk about the seniors.
Hey, Jennifer.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Got another question that came in, and it relates to this. With respect to your statement about not being in monolithic, does that mean we as providers ought to be sensitive to the possibility gender expression and/or identity may change?
Yes. I think to focus on that specifically, one of the things as providers, we make assumptions, and I'm guilty of this as anyone else, that you need to identify when you're working with family members or clients or adult children, how they wish to be addressed, what pronouns would they wish to be used in reference to them, what is their spouses or life partners, and you need to be very sensitive in making assumptions about married couples, where the married couples may be same-sex couples versus heterosexual couples. And also that, especially in the younger generation, I'd say more of the grandchildren of our clients, their sexual identity, their gender expression, their sexual orientation is evolving. I would argue that everyone in my age group and older, it's settled in at some point. So it's not fluid. People use the term non-binary. I didn't know what non-binary meant until probably 20 years ago, 15 years ago. I didn't understand that concept. I understand it now. The non-binary is that there are a lot of younger adults to millennials who do not necessarily identify themselves as male or female. And they see their sexual orientation, their gender expression as being fluid. And that, in fairness to everyone, that is, that is not common in what I grew up with as a boomer, but is much more common today in the millennials and the Gen Xers and the younger generations. Okay, I want to be sensitive to time, folks. I don't want to. So like I said, I am going to be 71. A lot of our clients are 10 years, 15 years older than myself. But if I was born in 1939 or 1935, and I was a gay or a lesbian person in my 20s or 30s, up until 2003, I was a criminal. I was, in fact, in some states and some jurisdictions, subject to criminal sanctions, criminal action, because of the person I loved or the lifestyle that I led. So you need to appreciate, and I apologize for being so strong with this statement, older adults who have been queer all their lives were very closeted for a very, very long time. And that was very pronounced in the McCarthy era. The McCarthy era was in the late 40s into the early 50s. I was a very young child. I don't remember experiencing McCarthyism, but many of our clients did. And during McCarthyism, people lost their jobs. People were hounded out of a lot of federal government positions here in the DMV because they were gay and lesbians. And it made them even more closeted, more guarded, more suspect of being out or public about who they were and what they were. So as we provide services for 80-year-olds, 85-year-olds, they are very leery of the consequences of being out in a retirement community, in an assisted living community, in a skilled nursing facility, with home health care providers coming into their personal residence. They're very guarded about it because they lived a life in which it was not okay to be queer in the workplace, it was not okay to be queer in a house of worship, it was not okay to be queer in the PTA, it was not okay to be queer anywhere. And that's not what we have today, but that's not how our clients, what was not their experience growing up as teenagers, as young adults, as adults. Okay, I want to move ahead, but please do not hesitate to continue to raise your hand. So finally, we did have the Supreme Court ruling that legalized marriage, and we had the ruling today, this Monday, that in fact legalized or made a specific statement by the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision that you could not discriminate in employment, housing, on the basis of gender expression, of gender identity, sexual orientation. I have to say, I am stunned, because in 1969, and I was pretty aware that I was, not pretty aware, I was very aware I was a queer person in 1969, that 50 years later, we would have marriage equality, and we have a 6-3 decision by the Supreme Court that you could not discriminate against queer people in the workplace and housing and employment and in the rest of society. That's an enormous amount of cultural change, social change in 50 years. It's quite remarkable. All right, I need to move this along a little quickly. This slide's about 5 years old, maybe 6 years old at the time, but the basic message here is as you move across the generations, the acceptance, the acknowledgement of queer people is improving, increasing. And I would say these percentages are probably about 5% higher today than when this slide was made. And you see it in the Supreme Court ruling this week. So public opinion has clearly moved, and clearly it is generational. And as the boomers move on, and I know we're probably all getting tired of those boomers, it will be increasingly more a world where queer life is more considered part of the norm than an exception. Couple of things more about your clients and your family members and who you're serving. You know, most of the older adults that are queer don't have children. They're more likely to live alone. They're less likely to have a partner in their 70s, 80s. And this number, 2.5 million, probably is probably a pretty gross underestimate of the number of individuals 65 plus who do in fact identify themselves as queer individuals. So when we think about the services, we think about the type of support that these older adults need. They're coming from a family structure which is different from some of their peers. I want to run through this quickly. This was part of the poll we talked about. And in health and medical care, the older queer person has experienced discrimination, abuse, harassment, and it's made them very leery of medical and health care. It's made them very leery of being public persons. And I don't want to repeat myself, but part of the negative health consequences is a reluctance to go to primary care, a reluctance to be totally transparent with their physicians, reluctance to go to the emergency room, a reluctance to enter into residential communities. When I was in Alexandria, Jennifer referenced when I worked at the Fountains of Washington House, I remember, and this was probably around 2006, a woman calls me up on the phone and she says, would you allow my wife and I to live together in your community? I was probably a little, I won't say naive, but kind of flippant about it. Of course I would. We would have no problem with you and your wife living together. And she said to me, I've called a couple of the communities around in Alexandria and Northern Virginia, and I'm not going to get into who she was speaking with. And she was told flat out, no, you and your wife could not cohabitate in the retirement community as a couple. So as I would say as recently as 2006, 2007, gay people, queer people, were still very guarded about how they could enter a retirement community and live in a senior community. Some of the family dynamics. A couple of things again about our business. And this is a little simplistic. Gay marriage is a legal marriage, period. Powers of attorney, guardianships, conservatorships, healthcare power of attorneys, financial power of attorneys. All of these documents for same-sex couples are the same as heterosexual couples, period. And they should be treated that way because that's the way it is legally. You still have a lot of life partners. You still have a lot of individuals who have not legally married. That's a choice that couple has made. All of their legal documents, however, still may be and are very valid if they're executed legal documents, whether or not they are legally married. children. I did reference in the previous slide that many older queer people don't have children, but not everyone. Some do have children. If you look back at 80 and 85-year-olds, many of them entered into, if they were lesbian women or they were gay men, entered into heterosexual marriages. Peer pressure, social pressure, family pressure, and in fact had children from those relationships. Some of those children may be entirely supportive and engaged and in the lives of their older lesbian mothers or gay fathers. Some of those children are not. Some of those children are totally estranged, not been in their lives for a very long time. And although they may in fact be their birth children, they may have nothing to do with the life of this 80-year-old person who is your client. You need to understand who is the family of choice, who are the children, who are the powers of attorneys, who are the spouses, who are the extended relationships that are the important ones for your client. And they will, as they get comfortable with you and you work with them, make that clear, and you need to help facilitate that. If you're an elder law attorney, if you're a geriatric care manager, and you're working with an older adult, you are routinely trying to understand the other relationships that are in the lives of that person. And those other relationships are defined by the individual, not defined by if they had children 40, 50, 60 years ago. You know, the child that shows up in a nursing home that hasn't seen their mother or father for 40 years may not be particularly welcomed by that older adult at this point in their lives. We've touched on this. Client considerations. They need to feel safe. They need to feel that they're not going to be subject to disapproval. They need to feel that they're going to be respected. And I've lived in the nursing home world for a long time, as well as the memory care world and assisted living world. And in specifically in the skilled nursing facilities, and more in assisted living and memory care. In the SNFs, there are federal regulations under CMS in regards to the training, cultural sensitivity, respect and dignity that nursing home providers must demonstrate in regards to their queer patients and their queer residents that are living in their communities.
Jennifer.
Yeah.
Yes, before you go back.
Yeah.
We're talking before, do you have a number or a percentage of the people that feel that they are forced back into the closet?
Well, I would say, if you look at the slide, discrimination, 48% report they were discriminated against when applying for senior housing. 43% reported they were mistreated in a residential community. 22% feel it's not safe to be out in a nursing home or assisted living. You know, data and research is, I'm not defending this as perfect data, and frankly, it's about 5 years old. But many individuals that are 80, 85 today, and are in an assisted living or a skilled nursing facility, may in fact have felt a need to be very, very secretive about who they are and what they are and what their life really was about. And I, for one, find that as a real shame, very painful. So if I was 80 years today, and it took me 40 years to come out of the closet, and then 40 years later, I'm going back into the closet during the last 4 or 5 years of my life, that's a very, very sad prospect. And I am not saying that the provider network is creating this environment. I'm really not saying that. I'm part of the provider network. But I'm saying that the individuals are going to be guarded and not trusting until they feel comfortable and they feel welcome and they feel embraced to be totally honest and transparent. Their adult children may be a lot more out there, and their grandchildren are going to be totally out there. But the older adults may in fact be a lot more protective because of what they've experienced over those 80 years. And how long it took for them to be comfortable with their parents. There are a lot of gay people, queer people didn't come out until their parents were deceased.
Right.
All right, where I want to get off my soapbox.
Okay.
There's a lot of resources on this slide. There are local resources, there are national resources. Seabury has our own Out and About program, which is a queer outreach and social program. Iona has a very proactive queer program. SAGE is a very active in the older adult world, is based on creating supportive and queer-friendly environments across the older adult spectrum of services. We have HRC in DC, PFLAG. PFLAG is a great organization. PFLAG is the parents of queer children, or not even children, queer people whose parents have organized themselves in support of their queer children. And I've been involved in I don't know how many gay pride parades. And the PFLAG folks, the parents, always get a great deal of support and love because they're taking a stand in recognition of their children. And if you think of anything that can't be more critical to one's self-being and self-respect and self-worth, is their mother and father acknowledging who they are and what they are. Whitman Walker is the local medical healthcare facility in the region for queer health, HIV testing, HIV counseling, healthcare medical services, counseling. They're really the hub of the medical side of these support services. So I appreciate your patience. I apologize if I came on a little strong at some points. I'm obviously very passionate about this. I think that the older adult services industry has come a long way. I think we will see increased demands for our services from queer older adults and older adults whose sons and daughters are gay and lesbian and trans. And if we want to be successful in our businesses, we need to be sensitive, appreciative, respectful, tuned in to their lifestyles, their needs, and most importantly, to demonstrate inclusivity, acceptance, understanding, and love. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. Um, Jennifer, I'm so happy that, that's why I stopped and asked you that question, because I know we had talked earlier and you shared your passion around that.
Mhm.
And so I wanted, because, you mentioned earlier that we hope that at the end of this, we all become allies. And I think that we're not thinking about, well, maybe some of the people we're serving are going to feel like they're forced to go back into the closet in order to be respected. And so I wanted you to share that, because it makes us more aware of how we interact and engage in all of our clients, so that they don't feel that need to have to go back into the closet and live the rest of their life guarded that way. So thank you so much for sharing and just being open and giving us, all of this information. There's several things that I was not even aware of, as far as like the binary, non-binary. I mean, I didn't know any of that. So thank you so much. And I think we had some people in the chat that were also stating how true it was when you talked about the legal documents and getting things in place. One person mentioned that there was an older man, and after his wife passed away, he thought the home was going to be for him, but his biological children took the home over and left him displaced. So there's, we can really relate to a lot of the points that you made today, and I'd like to thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can we do a couple of questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And you answered this in your last slide. Do you know of training that pertains to culturally competent care that you can suggest? And I think this slide that's up on the screen is a great answer to that question. Christine Wingate Spence says, I'm a certified dementia practitioner. Are there resources available for dementia and Alzheimer's in the LGBTQ community?
So I have to acknowledge I'm not familiar with specific resources that address individuals with cognitive impairment. The training has pretty much focused on the caregivers and the caregiver's sensitivity, caregiver's compassion and understanding across the board. CNAs, LPNs, RNs, social workers, activities, life enrichment professionals, etc. I would say the best person or best organization to reach out for that would be SAGE. But again, I think most of their training modules and resources are geared towards the staff in the organization for cultural competency and sensitivity, rather than specifically to the older adult who may be queer and have cognitive impairment. SAGE has a certification for residential communities. You can be SAGE certified. I'm not endorsing that, or I think it's a very good idea. I think it helps. If I was still in a director in a residential community, I would be extremely engaged with that aspect of becoming SAGE certified. But I am not familiar with specific training that pertains to cognitive impairment and a queer or older adult.
Great.
Other questions, Steve?
Let's see. Anne says, how can we get a copy of Jennifer's presentations? The resources would be great to have.
Okay, so what I will do is I'll put in the chat box all my contact information, my email address, my cell phone, my name, my title. Drop me an email. I'm happy to forward the PowerPoint to you. Happy to do that. I am not a certified trainer, although this program was originally much longer. and it was a CEU for nurses and social workers, 1 credit hour, one CEU. I did that in conjunction with a home health care agency, and it was also done originally when I was at Forest Hills and Forest Side of DC. It can be reconstituted as a CEU, but I would need a co-sponsor to do that.
Great. I think that's all the questions that we've got in the question block, and we've really burned through the hour here.
Yeah, I'm going to put all my contact information in the chat box. Thank you very, very much for allowing me to speak this morning. It's been a real pleasure and honor for me. And I thank you very, very much.
And thank you to Jennifer for being here, for taking the time and just educating us on all of the knowledge that you have around this topic. So we thank you again. And, you know, maybe we would invite you again when we're back in our different type of environment. But thank you so much. So Steve, at this point, if someone has, you know, something they'd like to share, any information coming up.
So what I would say is, at this point, just raise your hand, and it looks like Carrie has raised her hand. Carrie?
Yes, I didn't want to let her go. Just one question, that as I look at the presentation and I look at my brand and my company, and one of the statements that I have on a picture on a wall that I give to every applicant, we treat everyone and we encourage independence, dignity, and quality of life. So I may sound a little naive, but it's my, because I have a number of gay folks in my family. And I always been of the opinion, if we treat them with dignity and respect, you know, that's the foundation for us to be effective in this business. That's a question.
Yeah, I agree with you. Fundamentally, gay rights is civil rights, is universal rights. It's not something aside from that. What we're seeing in the current social environment, political environment, and I do not want to go off on too many tangents, folks need to move from being passive to more proactive, more positive, allies that are more engaged. So one way of doing that is on your website to have a gay symbol, a rainbow, something. It doesn't have to be hit people over the head, or in your brochures. I mean, residential communities have those little symbols about, you know, fair housing, and you have to, in residential communities, be able to accommodate individuals with physical disabilities. So you in marketing, my career is in marketing and sales. That's what I've done for all of my business life. Communicating positive images proactively is helpful. But unless you're folks, and I agree with you entirely, that the standard that you're setting with your team is very important and very, very good.
Great. Let's see. So if anybody else wants to, thank you, Carrie. Oh, and where are you from, Carrie? What organization?
Am I still on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm Comfort Care or Home Care Services.
Okay, great. Okay, great. If anybody else would like to make a comment, question, if you have a challenge. It can be related to the topic or just, you know, anything in general. Okay, looks like we got Hilbert. Hilbert?
Can you hear me?
Hi, Hilbert.
Hi. Good morning. I'm Hilbert Byers. I'm with PB Health, Home Care and Hospice Agency. We're located in the Baltimore area, but we are branching out to Prince George's County. So, you know, this talk was very important because we're dealing with folks in hospice, and you know, talk about being alone, and the caregivers are very scared on how to handle and help their family members. We always find when we have those tough conversations with folks from the community that they don't know how to interact, and if there may be some regrets that they had in the past that will kind of prohibit them from sharing love and also, you know, being a good cog in their healthcare. So, you know, this is definitely needed with reference to, you know, helping break the ice, especially when someone's at end of life. So thank you for sharing. You know, our team will be coming to Prince George's County in July. So we are looking forward to becoming a member of the provider network because we have some wonderful services. And, you know, I think that PB Health will be a very good resource and asset to the county.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And let's see. Okay. Any other questions, comments, sharing? All right. Well, Jennifer, you want to wrap things up, or?
Yes. Thank you guys again for attending, and be on the lookout in your emails for all of the information. We'll make sure that you have Jennifer Brown's information and our information about our next meeting next month, which I said is July 16th. And also, as I mentioned before, there's a caring for the caregiver on July 30th. So be on the lookout, all of the attendees here, for that information. And anyone who is not a member of Prince George's Senior Provider Network, please get in touch with me, and we'd love to invite you into our membership. We have a great community here, and we share all the time. We're sharing just information to help you do your business better, and it's all about serving our seniors and our caregivers. So I thank everyone for attending and look forward to seeing you next month. And if you'd like, I'll also just add, if there's anyone that needs information on how to get in touch with PGSPN, our president, Darylyn, actually just put her email address in the chat box. So Darylyn Marinelli is the president of Prince George's Senior Provider Network Group, and she just added her email address in the chat box. So feel free to reach out to Darylyn if you're interested in becoming a member. I thank you again before the hour, and thank you, Steve, for giving us the platform. Thank you again, Jennifer Brown. You had an excellent presentation, and everybody that participated, thank you again.
All right.